Hello and welcome to the Freeman Perspective. Tonight we're going to talk about geomancy. Could it be that our leaders are encoding secret things into the architecture? My beginning of my trip was in Orlando, Florida, my hometown, where they blew up City Hall for the movie Lethal Weapon. And then out in front of City Hall they erected a large phallus that many of the Denzians of Orlando were curious about. This happens to stand right across the street from the Bohemian Hotel. Now, just to the right of this phallus, we find what can only be described as, well, a gushing vagina. Because what we're finding is that the symbols and the signs incorporated into the architecture of our nation's capitals and government buildings are actually dedicated to a god and goddess. So as we see here, what we have is Aphrodite, and this is coupled with Hermes. Now, this is where we get the word hermaphrodite. And this is given out in the tarot as the magician card and as the empress. And what we'll find is that each of the tarot cards has significance in this geomancy. Now, the hermaphroditic symbols are given to us through popular culture. And what we'll see is that many of the pop icons are actually representations of this hermaphroditic symbol, such as Prince's symbol being a symbol of Mars crossed with the symbol of Venus, and then crossed with a hyperdimensional coil. Madonna, being a Kabbalist, also inculcates the idea of the hermaphrodite, much as the symbol of Janet Jackson bearing her breast is a symbol of the goddess, whereas the golden sundial on her nipple is the god, or the hermaphroditic symbol of the god and goddess. Now, these are known as Nimrod and Queen Semiramis. Nimrod is sometimes known as Bel and is often shown as such. And you will find these gods and goddesses put together as obelisks and archways, but then they also incorporate what is known as sacred geometry. Many of the cathedrals that were built in the medieval times were considered alchemical books in stone, where things were encoded into these structures to pass down through time, so that those of the initiates, those initiated in the esoteric orders, could decipher these and bring these ideas throughout time. Now, one of the main things that are incorporated is these concepts of sacred geometry. Now, you'll find that the people involved in this are often shown wearing certain vestments and also carrying magic wands. These people are very ceremonial and ritual in nature. They obsess themselves with symbols. They are very concerned with time and the calendar. And they also follow the course of the sun quite obsessively. So I thought I'd go back to where it all began. I went to the oldest city in America, known as St. Augustine. I thought perhaps if I went to the beginning of this nation, I might be able to find some clues. Well, as synchronicity would have it, I found myself sitting at Athena's restaurant, and I became quite good friends with the owner there. I still talk to him today. But just outside of Athena's and across the street is the courtyard of St. Augustine. And in this courtyard, we find quite interesting things, such as this statue. And this is a statue of Ponce de Leon, where he landed in 1513. And they erected many edifices to honor themselves. Now perhaps, being that this man was only 4 foot 11 inches tall, this might explain why he felt the need to construct so many erections. Because St. Augustine is covered in obelisks. I found them everywhere. There are 3 in this park alone, and always the members putting their gang signs on them, which just happens to be the Masonic compass and square. But these obelisks aren't only identified by the Freemasons. Here we find also a cross adorning this one. And up at the top of which it has cannonballs as its capstone. And this is a monument to signify our dead, period. But don't let these symbols fool you, because these men had no real concern for human safety or life, because this particular obelisk stands over what's known now as the slave market. Once you recognize that our leaders are not who you think they are, and that they have no concern for human well-being, that they can buy and sell humans at will, and you'll start to understand. Because these are the warmongers, building large fortresses in order to conquer lands. But they seem to find their roots back in ancient Atlantis, in the merfolk. So you see this merman on this cannon, which is in the fortress, and of course the fish monsters adorning it. But who is it that owns this cannon? Well, it just happens to be Yale University. Isn't that where the Skull and Bones Society is? Where the CIA was formed? So I thought I'd look a little deeper. And there's a man named Flagler that owns much of St. Augustine. And this is his college. And I found the campus surrounded by implements of destruction, with spiked mace balls and even what seemed to be an Iron Maiden, devices of torture. Henry Flagler showed his sign as he kept his hand here in the pocket. This is called the hidden hand, and that's exactly who these men are, the hidden hand behind everything. But on his lion's gait, I couldn't help but notice some unusual features. Notice here we have a couple of cherubim riding on fish monsters. And then in between them is a child in a portal, and what could be astronomical symbols of the crab and the lobster. But even more disconcerting was the next frame on the frieze, which showed these 2 merfolk angels pulling on a torch with an owl in the portal. And then some strange amphibian creatures, and what looks to be a quite traumatized angel in another portal. And I have found that these men, these ones that we call our leaders, are into traumatizing children. And they seem to have some strange connection to these merfolk or amphibians. Now, the owl symbol came to light when Alex Jones snuck into Bohemian Grove. And he found many of the leaders of industry and of the government worshiping a 40-foot stone owl. And he equated this with the esoteric or occult order